If we can make her responsible and push for a divorce, we'll get a hefty settlement, right? Then I can marry you, Emma. Until then, I'll take as much of her assets as I can. I froze as I watched the video captured on the dashcam. My fiancé was laughing as he talked about why he was marrying me. And the person he was talking to was the woman sitting in the passenger seat, his mistress. Shaking with disbelief, I made up my mind. I would never forgive him. I would make him pay. The showdown was set for Sunday, the day of our wedding reception. I'm Karen, in my 30s, working at a clothing company. Although I am energetic and working now, I once became a recluse. I lost my parents in a car accident during high school, and the shock kept me from going to school. I couldn't go out at all and dropped out of school. After that, I moved abroad with my aunt and her husband. In a completely different environment, they showered me with love and I gradually became able to live normally. I took the GED so I wouldn't have trouble finding a job and passed successfully. When I became an adult, I decided to become independent and returned home to get a job. The job I found was at a clothing company, which I loved. I started as a sales staff, sometimes using my language skills to assist tourists. And now I manage several branch stores in the area. My best friend is Sally, a colleague who joined the company at the same time as me. Sally is my confidant and I can talk to her about anything. We often went out for drinks together. One day, as usual, Sally and I went out for dinner after work and unexpectedly ran into someone. Hey? Could it be you? Huh? I turned around to see a high school classmate, Mike. Mike? Long time no see. It's been since high school, right? How have you been? I'm out drinking with my coworkers. How about you, Karen? I'm with a friend. I see. It's nice to have good friends. I was a bit worried about you back then. Would you like to join us? What? But I don't want to intrude on your company, folks. Don't worry, they're all friendly people from the trading company I work at. Here's my business card. I'm working at a clothing company. We exchanged business cards. You always liked fashion back then, didn't you? Huh? How do you know that? Well, there are things I'd like to talk about. Would you like to join us? Sure. I'll ask my friend. When I asked Sally, she agreed to join us. Meeting an old classmate is like a drama. Maybe there's something to this. She joked, smiling at me. Despite my skepticism, I was a bit excited. Actually, Mike was someone I had a bit of a crush on in high school. He was good at sports, always the center of attention with a bright personality, admired by everyone. Then came my parents' accident. After dropping out, we lost touch. Meeting him again in such a place, and remembering me was quite a surprise. Mike's 3 colleagues were all great conversationalists, and the drinking party was lively. As we parted, Mike said, "Let's go out for a drink again sometime. Just the 2 of us." From then on, we started meeting more often. Mike asked about my high school days again. What happened to you? You suddenly stopped coming to school, and it surprised us. Actually, my parents died in a car accident, and it was mentally tough, so I couldn't go to school. Really? That must have been hard. Did you have a tough time living? How did you manage? Yeah. Well, there were a lot of things, but my parents left me an inheritance that I could live on for the rest of my life. And my aunt and uncle took care of me a lot, so things settled down somehow. Really? That's amazing. But I'm really glad we could meet again like this. You might think it's too late now, but I've had feelings for you since high school, Karen. What? Really? I know it's late. Honestly, after you stopped coming to school, I couldn't forget you, even now. I still have feelings for you. It's embarrassing, right? Knowing that, I'm still going to say this. Will you go out with me with marriage in mind? What? Really? Yeah, I couldn't joke about something like this. But I can't believe it. I wasn't someone who stood out, and we didn't talk much, right? Yeah. You were always quietly observing everything. That calmness was what drew me to you. It's kind of embarrassing to say. Mike blushed. So, what do you think? Will you go out with someone like me? Yes, please take care of me. When I answered, Mike said, "Oh, thank goodness. I was so nervous." And started laughing. And so, the two of us began dating. A few months later, we started preparing for marriage. First, we had a family meeting at Mike's house. Mike's father had passed away from an illness a few years ago, and now he lives with his mother, Jane. Nervously, I said, "Nice to meet you. I'm Karen, and I'm dating Mike." Jane, with a stern look, asked some probing questions. "What made you two start dating?" "We were high school classmates, and we reconnected after a long time." "Oh, you went to the same high school." "I'm sorry, I don't remember your name." "Some kids greeted me at the graduation, but were you one of them?" "No, I didn't graduate from high school." "What?" Then Mike stepped in. "Mom, she had some things going on back then and left high school." "What? Dropped out?" "You're a dropout?" "Yes, that's what it comes down to." "But..." I tried to mention that I had passed the GED, but Jane continued to ask questions one after another. "Then, what kind of job do you have?" "I work at a clothing company." "Oh, I guess being in retail isn't a problem even if you dropped out?" Jane seemed to assume my job was in customer service. I was stunned by her obvious disdain for my dropout status. Unaware of my reaction, Jane continued. "Mike graduated from a prestigious university, right? So I thought he would bring home a woman with a similar education. But you dropped out, so I'm surprised." She said this without a hint of apology. The conversation went on. "Are you going to quit your job? Retail doesn't pay much, does it? Well, it might be good for you to stay at home and take care of things." She went on saying whatever she pleased. I said, "No, I'll keep working." Jane looked displeased. "If you don't make much money, it would be more helpful if you did housework." "I love my job. Besides, the salary isn't that bad." I retorted, and she said, "What are you talking about? Compared to Mike, who works at a top trading company, it's way less, right? Well, you can work until you have kids. But make sure you do the housework properly." She spoke as if we would be living together after marriage. From this exchange, it was clear that Jane and I were not going to get along. Living together would probably mean being treated like a housekeeper. We somehow managed to get through the family meeting without any major issues and decided to go home for the day. However, when we started planning the wedding, Jane became even more intrusive. I had intended to prepare everything with Mike, just the two of us. "Since your parents aren't around, you probably have no idea about wedding planning, right? And you dropped out of high school." She constantly mocks me for dropping out whenever something comes up. While it's true that I'm clueless about weddings, isn't there a nicer way to put it? Our plan was to have a small, intimate ceremony with just close friends and family, but Jane had a completely different idea. "What are you talking about? Our family has a long history and lots of relatives. Mike is the eldest son of such a family. He graduated from an Ivy League school and knows so many people. It's only natural to have a grand wedding. This is why dealing with someone without parents and who dropped out is so frustrating." She was already full of snide remarks. Mike said nothing to Jane. So, the wedding preparations began, not as we had planned. After several meetings, it was just a month before the wedding. I was already exhausted from dealing with Jane. Seeing my distress, "Let's go shopping," my friend Sally suggested. Most of the wedding preparations were done, and I definitely needed a break. We decided to go to a new outlet mall the next weekend. I would drive. Driving is my hobby and a way to relax on weekends. I take pride in my Italian car, equipped with an option that records everything inside the car automatically while driving. Watching these recordings with friends after a drive used to be fun, but lately, I hadn't been able to go for drives because of the wedding preparations. It had been a while since I went shopping with Sally, and I was really looking forward to it. Especially since it was a new mall we were visiting for the first time. I was so excited that I arrived at the meeting place with Sally early. With time to kill, I fiddled with the navigation system and pressed the history button, only to see the name of an unfamiliar hotel. "What? What is this?" I sometimes lent the car to Mike, who said he used it to drive with friends. The hotel history was from the previous weekend. It was the day I was trying on my dress, and Mike said he wanted to keep my dress a surprise for the wedding day. So he went out with friends and borrowed my car. Did he visit this hotel with a friend? Just then, Sally arrived. "Sorry to keep you waiting." So, I decided to check it later. The shopping trip was fun, but that hotel name lingered in my mind. After parting with Sally, I went home and checked the history again. Nervously, I searched for the hotel name on my smartphone and found the same address. "It's a motel!" I decided to check the car's recording camera. And there, in the passenger seat next to Mike, was a woman I didn't know. She had long hair, was well made up, and looked a bit younger than me. "Where should we go today?" Mike asked. "I feel like eating something delicious," she replied in a sweet voice. "Let's go to that Italian place we went to before. How about a nearby hotel after that?" "Sounds good." Clearly, he was cheating on me. In front of my shocked eyes, the video kept playing. "Are you really getting married? You said you would marry me." The woman pouted. "I was planning to, but then I reconnected with her." "What do you mean?" "She seems to have quite a bit of wealth." "What?" Mike's shocking admission hit me hard. That woman has always acted like a princess since high school, and I heard she inherited her late parents' estate. I knew about it back then, but I never knew the exact amount. When I found out, she said it was enough to never worry for a lifetime. It might be several $100 million. Isn't that amazing? So, you're after her money? Does that mean you'll never marry me? Don't worry. I'll break up with her eventually. I'll make her take the blame and get a lot of alimony from the divorce, right? Then I'll marry you, Emma. In the meantime, I'll take as much as I can from her." "Mike, you're such a bad guy." "But if that's the case, I can wait." She laughed nastily, and Mike joined in with a big laugh. My body completely froze. It was shocking to learn that Mike had another woman, but even more shocking was that the person I admired was trying to get married just for his own desires. And I felt pathetic for being fooled by such a terrible man. The shock was so great that, even though I usually don't take time off work when I'm not feeling well, I ended up bedridden this time. While I was resting at home, my friend Sally came by, worried about me, so I decided to tell her everything. "What? That's the worst. Break up with him. It's a good thing you found out before getting married. Sally got angry as if it were happening to her. That's true. I'm glad I found out Mike's true nature before getting married. But it's frustrating. It's not just the cheating. I can't forgive him for trying to marry me for my assets. And Mike's mom always looks down on me for not finishing high school whenever something comes up. Yeah. So, you want to get back at them? But there's only a month left until the wedding. That's right. At that moment, a good idea came to me, and I looked into Sally's eyes. Will you help me? And whispered. And so, I began to plan a way to make that condescending family regret looking down on me. The showdown was on Sunday, the day of the wedding reception. According to my friend Sally, who was keeping an eye on things, Mike and Jane were in the dressing room at the venue, all dressed up and pacing around the room. This was because the bride, me, had not yet arrived. What's going on? Mike, did she run away? No way. That's why I didn't like someone who didn't finish high school. All the relatives are here. This is so embarrassing for me. I invited my coworkers from the company too. If the bride isn't here, it's going to be a huge problem. Mom, what should we do? They seemed more concerned about their own pride than the bride. But the bride still didn't show up. We have no choice. Let's explain the situation to the guests and put all the blame on the bride. Jane went to the banquet hall where the guests were waiting. The bride didn't even finish high school. It seems she doesn't understand basic manners. We apologize for keeping you waiting without the bride and groom being here together. And began to explain. Hearing this, the guests began to stir. What? Jane was stunned. Seizing the moment, I jumped out from the back of the guest seats. I'm right here. Karen, why are you there? Oh, come on. It's because you all were so late. You were 3 hours late. So, I greeted everyone by myself. What? But the reception starts at 3 p.m., right? That's what the invitation says. Jane shouted, showing the invitation in her hand. What is going on? Mike, who came in later, also seemed confused. No. The start time is noon. It's written on both the invitation and the hotel's information. I showed the genuine invitation with a triumphant look on my face. Yes, I had given a false invitation to the groom's family. Except for the guests and the event schedule, I was in charge of all the wedding preparations, so it was easy to deceive them. My firm explanation was met with applause from the guests who arrived according to the invitation. Noticing Mike's arrival, the guests laughed. Finally here. The bride's been waiting. And said, "Ah, boss. Thank you for coming today." Mike scratched his head and greeted them. Hey, did you drink too much at the pre-party and oversleep? Normally the bride would be furious. But she made a joke of it, saying maybe you were with your mistress and that's why you're late. Had everyone laughing. Hearing this, the crowd got noisier again. In contrast, Mike's relatives all looked displeased. This is unacceptable. Being late on such an important day. Such reprimands came from all around. But the real laughter at their expense was yet to come. With the bride and groom finally together, the reception began. The reception proceeded smoothly, and a screen was set up midway. Now, we'd like to introduce a video about how the couple met. A surprise from the bride. The host announced. Mike looked surprised. The lights in the hall dimmed, and the screen displayed the title, Why We Decided to Marry. Yes, it was the video from the car the other day. showing Mike boasting to his mistress about why he chose me as his bride. "What is this?" Mike's face turned pale. I wanted everyone to know the real reason Mike decided to marry. I explained as Jane, looking distraught, she screamed, "What is this? Who is that woman?" Mike fell silent. Aside from the panicked Mike and Jane, there was another commotion in the guest area. Incredibly, the mistress was there. In the guest area reserved for Mike's coworkers. She seemed to be a colleague and was visibly uncomfortable under the scrutiny. Jane confronted Mike, who turned pale and looked to me for help. "This is not what it looks like." "What? What do you mean?" "She was pestering me, so I said those things to get her off my back. I didn't mean it." "If you didn't mean it, why did you go to the hotel so many times?" "It's in the GPS history." "What?" "As you can see, I have all the evidence of the affair. I will be seeking damages through my lawyer." I stared firmly at Mike. Jane glared at me. "What kind of woman are you? How dare you humiliate us like this?" "I'm sorry for my lack of manners. But your son is far more disgraceful." "Is it because of how you raised him?" I then walked over to the staff and borrowed the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, I sincerely apologize for this. As you can see, Mike has been unfaithful. So this wedding is off. Unfortunately, I was not Mike's true love. Please guide him towards happiness in the future." The venue was in chaos, but let's leave the cleanup to Mike and Jane. While resting in the waiting room, my friend Sally came in. "It's over." "Yeah. Thanks for thinking this through with me until today." "Okay, let's go get something delicious to eat." Agreed. I left the venue with Sally. Later, through my lawyer, I demanded compensation from Mike. Of course, he will also have to cover the cost of the venue. Mike's plan to get compensation from me failed miserably. I heard later that Mike and Jane were abandoned by all their relatives, and Jane, who was so vain, must have been deeply wounded in her pride. It serves them right. There were many of Mike's bosses and colleagues from his company among the guests. So Mike felt out of place and eventually resigned. And that's no surprise. Nobody trusts a person who gets married just for money. Having lost his job, Mike turned to gambling in despair and his debts started piling up. Hearing that he graduated from a top university is laughable. Naturally, he couldn't marry the woman he was cheating with either, and she also quit her job as well. It's her own fault. Of course, I demanded compensation from her too. She's now working desperately at a nightclub to pay back her debts after borrowing from shady lenders. I went on a refreshing trip with Sally. We tried activities we'd never done before and ate lots of delicious food to relieve the stress we'd accumulated. Two guys who seemed to be having fun approached us. When we talked to them, we found out that their company was surprisingly close to our workplace. And we even made plans to go out for drinks together. I have a feeling that something new is waiting for me. Leaving the memories of those pitiful people behind, I offered flowers to my parents' memorial portraits. I'm going to have my baby back in my hometown. Ashley, you're just in the way, so could you please leave soon? One day, when I returned from work, there was my sister, Brittany, who had supposedly married and left home years ago, in my room. She was proudly stroking her bulging belly as if to show it off to me, but I couldn't say anything at the sight. Seeing me standing dumbfounded, looking around the room, she let out a vulgar laugh. A woman who can't even get a boyfriend is just a nuisance. I've thrown out everything that was in the room to make it easier for you to leave, so you should be thankful. By morning, my room, which had been just as usual when I left for work, now had nothing left. The bed, the table, the rug. Not even the curtains. Nothing was left. The only thing there was Brittany, standing arrogantly in the center of the room. Your smartphone and wallet are in your work bag, right? If so, you won't die of exposure, and it's about time you stopped leeching off our parents and started living on your own, Ashley. That's true. I didn't think about getting my stuff back or kicking her out. I just didn't want to see her face anymore and wanted to leave. That was all. As I turned my back, I could hear her, unable to contain herself, start laughing. You can't say anything even after all this. Aren't you too weak, Ashley? Ignoring the blatant mockery, I continued down the hallway. My dad was on the phone in the living room, and my mom, Sabrina, was probably preparing dinner. I passed through the front door, listening to the cheerful sound of my dad's voice and my mom's humming. I breathed in the night air. I readjusted my bag on my shoulder and headed for the area near the station where there were many hotels. Along the way, it suddenly occurred to me. Come to think of it, who's going to pay the mortgage on this house now? Well, never mind. I'm Ashley, a 27-year-old office lady leading a pretty normal life. I'm working as an office worker while also doing a side job, and while I'm making a steady living as an office worker, I'm also doing work that I like on the side. I am involved in a wide range of activities, including video editing, web writing, and blog management. At 27, I'm at what society considers the age to start thinking about marriage, but love and marriage aren't really on my mind. I enjoy my work, and with Brittany being treated like a princess at home and feeling a sense of alienation from my family, the desire to build a happy family of my own just doesn't take root. I've always lived at home, sharing my life with my parents. Housework is supposed to be divided between me and my mom, though I end up doing most of it. My mom comes back from her part-time job exhausted, and seeing her like that makes me think that I, being younger, should at least handle the housework. Ever since I started working, I've been contributing to the household expenses, which is several times more than what my friends living alone in the city contribute. I'm an indoor person who loves to study, and since I didn't go out much even during my student days, I didn't have many desires and didn't have much to spend my money on besides savings. Even after becoming a working adult, I didn't go out much, so I contributed more to the household expenses to make things a bit easier for my parents. Moreover, since last year, at my parents' request, I've been contributing towards the mortgage as well. My parents seem to think it's no problem for me to contribute more towards the living expenses and mortgage, considering me to be serious and earning a steady income. However, I feel like my parents aren't very interested in me. That's because their attention has always been on Brittany, my younger sister by a year. She is outgoing and very active. During her student days, she was always going out somewhere on holidays. My parents naturally thought that her lifestyle required money, so even when she was living at home, they never asked her for contributions towards the mortgage or even the living expenses. It seems that in my parents' view, based on our personalities, I, the older sister, was seen as low maintenance, while she required more attention. A little while ago, Brittany moved out to live on her own. Her workplace wasn't far from our parents' house, and I wondered why she wanted to live alone, so I asked her. Then, Brittany. Because I want to try living by myself. I want to go out at night, and I can invite my boyfriend over. Said to me. This answer was far from what I had imagined. I thought it would be something about wanting to make things easier for our parents or wanting to be independent. Meanwhile, I had no intention of leaving our family home, thinking it natural to support each other as a family, even if it meant contributing a bit more towards the household expenses. Then, one day when I returned home, she was waiting for me. Welcome back, Ashley. I'm getting married. And I want you to come to the family meeting, please? The place was going to be a fancy restaurant in the city. Make sure you wear something decent, Ashley. I don't want to be laughed at because of your usual plain clothes, she said. I don't have any glamorous clothes to wear. I decided to go in my usual suit. After all, it's the most respectful outfit I have. Brittany's fiancé, Walter, seemed sincere and was a genuinely nice guy. Nice to meet you, Ashley. I'm looking forward to getting to know you. When he greeted me, I had a very good impression of him. I thought to myself that Brittany, for once, had chosen a very good partner. I was hoping that maybe, just maybe, Brittany would settle down a bit with him by her side, thinking sisterly thoughts. At first, both families were stiff and formal, but as drinks were served, the formal tension eased, and the conversation turned to talks of future children after marriage. I'm embarrassed to say, our eldest daughter, Ashley, is nearing 30, unmarried with no plans for it, so it looks like we can only hope for grandchildren from our younger daughter, Brittany. I'm so eager to see them. My mom shared. I want to have kids right after getting married. Maybe around 3. The conversation grew lively. Suddenly, I noticed Walter's previously cheerful smile had turned into a forced grimace, and he seemed uncomfortable. I felt he was uncomfortable just like me. I wished it would be over soon. After that, my parents started doting on Brittany as an investment towards their first grandchild. If Brittany said, eating here makes it easier to get pregnant, they'd immediately go out to buy it, telling her eat a lot. One day, they even went to a department store to buy dresses because tight clothes might be preventing pregnancy. And if Brittany mentioned, visiting this place can bless you with children, they'd take her on a trip there. My parents running around at her whim was usual for me, so I didn't think much of it, just the usual again. However, one day, Brittany made a snide remark to me. It's tough for me because Ashley won't marry or even try to give mom and dad a grandchild. Must be nice, living the easy single life. No plans to marry and move out? Oh, but with that plain face, I guess men aren't exactly flocking to you. Maybe you need a bit more appeal. Should I teach you how to put on makeup? She laughed. Her words irritated me, but I knew arguing back would only lead to hysterics and an unmanageable situation, so I chose to say nothing. She has always been confident that she is more loved by our parents than I am, often speaking to me with boldness. Then one day, Brittany got pregnant. Even she can get pregnant. I wondered if she really could become a good mom, but remembering Walter, I thought, with a husband like him, maybe it'll be okay. Brittany said, I'm pregnant, and I don't want to be a burden at work, and I want to focus on raising my child. And quit her job with ease. However, Walter thought that raising a child would be expensive and that living on a single income to become a housewife wasn't realistic. But she didn't listen to him and quit her job anyway. One day, when I returned from work, I noticed my room's door was ajar by about 3 inches. I'm meticulous, so I never leave closets or drawers open. Of course, I always make sure to close the door firmly. There's no way my parents would enter my room to clean. Because I do all the cleaning. Cautiously opening the door to my room, I was shocked. There was nothing there. Although I never had many possessions, the things I cherished since childhood were stored in labeled boxes in the closet. The electronic dictionary my parents bought me for my 10th birthday, the commuter pass case my grandparents gave me when I turned 15 for my high school entrance celebration, my diploma, certificates, trophies, albums, all gone. Even if they were old or worn out, they were important to me. Everything that was supposed to be there until this morning was gone without a trace. Standing dumbfounded alone in the empty room, I heard a familiar voice from behind. Oh, Ashley, you're back? I've decided to have my baby back in my hometown. Brittany said with a laugh, and I immediately understood. It must have been Brittany who had moved my belongings.
Brittany, where did you put my stuff? In storage?
I asked in a panic, but she said with a laugh, "What's the rush? It wasn't anything important, right? Just junk." Hearing my important things referred to as junk made anger well up inside me.
They might be junk to you, but they're important to me. Give them back now. And who does something as insane as moving all someone's belongings while they're not home?
It must have been the first time she saw me raise my voice like that. Because Brittany seemed surprised and then blurted out, "I've already thrown them away." I think it was the first time in my 27 years that I've been this angry, but I couldn't stop.
Enough! It's outrageous to throw away someone's belongings without permission. Bring them back now.
But she unapologetically said, "They've already been taken by the garbage truck, so it's impossible, obviously." She said this with a look of disdain. Continuing, she added, "What's the big deal? Getting so mad just because I threw away some junk? Are you crazy? Don't yell like that, it's bad for my baby." She said this while stroking her belly, showing it off to me. And then she continued, "I've decided to live here even after the baby is born. It's going to be tough after childbirth, and Mom and Dad want to see their grandchild every day. Walter plans to stay here too, so just using my room won't be enough. That's why I decided to use your room as well. You understand, right? After all, Ashley, you're the unfilial one." The sheer selfishness of not considering anyone else's circumstances left me dumbfounded. Going back to one's parents' house for childbirth is supposed to be a temporary return around the birth. But to continue living there with her husband and child? That's not a temporary return, it's cohabitation. And then, to be unilaterally labeled as unfilial, my anger started bubbling up. Do you even realize you're being unfilial, Ashley? Being the eldest daughter and still living at home without getting married. I'm going to show Mom and Dad my child's face and make a life where we can see each other every day. You know who's doing more for our parents, right? It was as if I was being blamed one-sidedly, but I couldn't just stay silent. If you want to live in this house as a family, then that's something the whole family should discuss. Especially since you want to use my room, you should have told me beforehand. If I knew the date you were coming back, I could have." Before I could finish, she interrupted by banging on my room door.
Shut up! See, this is why you're always so annoying. That's why I had to make it so you'd have to leave, because you're just a nuisance.
That's just unilateral anger. She's trying to use someone else's room, has thrown away the belongings of the person currently living there, and yet she talks as if she's the victim. Brittany kept banging on the door.
You're in the way. Disappear. Don't ever come back.
I was left with nothing but dumbfounded astonishment. Then, as you wish, I'll just leave. I don't have any belongings to pack anyway. My mounting anger had dissipated into sheer astonishment. I felt I didn't even want to see them ever again. I turned around and headed straight for the entrance. My parents didn't seem to care that I, who had just come home, was leaving through the front door. My dad was probably bragging on the phone to a relative about how his pregnant daughter had come home and would be living with them for good. From the kitchen, where my mom was probably making Brittany's favorite dishes, I could hear her humming. I wasn't living with my family expecting anything in return. I thought the difference in how Brittany and I were treated since childhood was because she was charming and good at sweet-talking our parents, and I had accepted that. But now, as an adult, handling most of the household responsibilities, this was the treatment I got. despite most of my salary going towards the household expenses and the mortgage to make life easier. And yet, they welcomed her, who contributed nothing to the household expenses, with open arms. The bad aspects of my parents I had tried not to see were now merging with my feelings towards Brittany, turning into disdain. Without saying I'm leaving or goodbye, I opened the front door. Neither my parents nor Brittany spoke to me until the door closed behind me. A week later, on payday. Usually, today would be the day I transfer living expenses and the mortgage payment into my dad's bank account, but I didn't make the deposit. There's no obligation for me to pay the mortgage for a house I no longer live in. The mortgage was initially taken out by my dad, so it should have been planned according to his income to make repayments manageable. I figured that my not making a deposit now wouldn't suddenly make the household budget unsustainable. However, after a while, I received a call from my mom. As soon as I answered,
Ashley, we're in big trouble. We received a notice for unpaid mortgage. I checked, and there's no money in your dad's bank account.
she rushed into it. She was panicking, not waiting for my response before continuing.
Ashley, do you know why? Did you withdraw it?
Contrary to her panicked voice, I answered calmly. All I did was stop making deposits. I didn't withdraw anything. If there's an unpaid mortgage, it means the payment couldn't be processed. Did you check if there was enough balance on the due date?
You didn't make a deposit? Why?
She sounded genuinely puzzled, which confused me. Because it was agreed I'd contribute to the living expenses and mortgage as long as I lived at home. If I moved out, I wouldn't pay anymore, right? I don't live there anymore. It seemed to dawn on her then, as I heard her take a sharp breath.
Oh, right, then you don't need to pay the living expenses. But can't you still contribute to the mortgage? Even living alone, you should have some surplus, right?
Sorry, but that's impossible. My current rent is $5,000 alone. I'm stretched thin as it is. I can't afford to pay for a mortgage on a house I'll never return to.
$5,000. But you're just a salaried worker. How can you afford such a place?
Hearing her astonished voice, I sighed. That's the same amount I used to give to our household every month. Asking such a thing now really shows you never had an interest in me. If that's how it is, I can't discuss money matters with you anymore. Right now, it seems like you see me only as a wallet. I could hear my mom's small whimper on the other end. No, she repeated, her voice thinner than I'd ever heard. I felt no pity. It's been over a month since I silently left the house. Yet, they never inquired about the mortgage, the living expenses, or my rent. Not once showing concern for my well-being, just money, money, money. It painfully clear they were interested not in me, but in my money. Thus, I felt no desire to share that I was not only working my main job, but also doing a wide range of side jobs online, resulting in a total income far surpassing my dad's monthly earnings. The reason I used to contribute $5,000 monthly, which also served as savings, was because the house still had 15 years left on its mortgage. But it seems my mom had assumed all this time that the money was coming from my dad's income. Given his age and years of service, it's understandable she might think so, but how could she not notice when the exact amount was deposited every month without fail? If she had even glanced at my dad's pay stubs, she would have realized the discrepancy. In the end, it seems my mom didn't care about the source of the money. That's probably why she didn't notice when the monthly income was cut by more than half. The continuation of insufficient balance for the mortgage payments led to the notices, and it was only then that she seemed to realize something was amiss. It's somewhat typical of her to only notice something was gone when it's too late, which made me chuckle a bit. Moreover, lately, they had been caught up in first grandchild fever, indulging Brittany's every whim by purchasing expensive items like baby cribs, strollers, designer baby clothes, and even maternity photo shoots.
But, Ashley, without your deposits, we can't make ends meet. We were hoping you could send some money as remittances.
I already said that's impossible. If Brittany is going to live there with her husband, they should contribute some living expenses. If that's still not enough, why doesn't Mom increase her part-time work? My suggestion was met with my mom's high-pitched voice.
She just gave birth. How can I increase my part-time work and not be there to help with the baby? It's already so hard. You don't expect Brittany to work, do you? How can you say such a terrible thing?
That's not what I meant. If they're going to live as a family in the house, they should contribute towards the living expenses. I did the same. Isn't Walter still working? And you plan to live together without asking him to contribute anything? I tried to answer as calmly as possible, not wanting to provoke her, but silence followed. It might be fine if it's just for the maternity period, but Brittany said she plans to live there indefinitely, right? Dad seems to agree. Then, those who will live together should discuss and decide how to manage finances. I've already left the house, so I can't be part of that discussion. I waited for a response, but there was none. Then, I'm going to hang up. I don't plan to contact you all anymore. After this call, I'll block everyone's number, so you can delete mine too. Goodbye. I ended the call. The last thing I heard was my mom's surprised what? Before she could call back, I quickly set my smartphone to block all three of them. After confirming the settings, I took several deep breaths and walked over to the living room window. From my 25th floor apartment, I couldn't see the people below without looking down. After leaving my family home, I moved into a high-rise apartment building. In fact, my side income had exploded, allowing me to save tens of thousands of dollars a month, even after transferring $5,000 home. Remembering how my mom would spend whatever money she had, I felt relieved I never proposed using my savings to pay off the mortgage in one lump sum. After all, my parents also wanted me out. It's unlikely that Brittany, heavily pregnant, could have moved my bed, table, and other items on her own. Someone must have helped her. While I'd like to think Walter wouldn't participate in such a thorough removal of my belongings. The fact remains that if such a significant move was happening, both my parents must have noticed. On that day, I was the only one who had gone to work, so they were all supposed to be at home. Yet, when I came back, no one said a word to me, and they ignored me even as I was leaving. Whether Brittany asked them or not, it was clear my parents shared the intention to drive me out and had assisted her in doing so. My parents were no different from her. A realization that made me give up everything and decide to leave. Had I paid off the mortgage in one lump sum, the three of them would be living comfortably in a spacious house. I couldn't stand the thought of that. Which is why I chose to live in a high-rise apartment. I remember how we, as a family, used to gather around the TV, dreaming about living in such a place. Despite choosing my new home partly out of spite, it turned out to be much more comfortable than expected. My own furniture, an undisturbed space, the freedom of living on my own earnings, all of these were deeply satisfying. Making my mom believe I was living in an obviously upscale place felt exhilarating. Especially since I impulsively claimed the rent was $5,000, higher than the reality, but she didn't notice. Moreover, getting along well with my neighbors on the same and adjacent floors was a joy I hadn't anticipated. I expected conversations to revolve around income bragging or the number of cars owned, but everyone was modest, making it easy to live among them. 3 months later, my peaceful life was disrupted. As I was leaving the office, I heard a voice behind me. Turning around, I saw Brittany grabbing my shoulder. Ashley, there's something I need to talk to you about. Brittany spoke with her lips quivering slightly. Maybe it's because I've just given birth and am now busy raising children, so my skin and hair are rougher than they were a year ago. Yet her charm was intact, attracting the attention of colleagues and employees from other companies as they passed by.
Sorry, I have plans later. If it's about the house, you should talk to Mom.
As I said this and gently tried to remove her hand, her eyes quickly filled with tears. Seeing that she was on the verge of crying, she felt the cold stares from those around her. It would be troublesome if I forced myself to chase him away and people who didn't know anything about him thought I was cold. Brittany trembles repeatedly, begging, so I have no choice but to face her. Sighing, I suggested that we go to a cafe in front of the station, and he was very happy to follow me.
Actually, I've been having an affair, and Walter found out. He's thinking of divorcing me.
These were the words she uttered the moment the waiter left after taking our orders. Sounding like something out of a drama.
He did a DNA test on the baby without me knowing, and realized it wasn't his child. He's furious, saying we're getting a divorce.
Brittany's whispers, aware that her story was not one I wanted to hear, only added to the shock of the revelations she laid before me.
He said he doesn't want custody because it's not his child. He's talking about severing the parent-child relationship. I didn't really understand everything he said, but he mentioned not giving us any money at all and that he'll be seeking damages. Ashley, you're wealthy, right? Can't you do something?
I was speechless at her audacity. She was the one who had the affair, so naturally, she'd be facing demands for damages. Normally, no one would want to pay child support for a child that isn't theirs. I couldn't comprehend how Brittany thought it was my responsibility to fix her mess.
Why don't you ask the man you had the affair with to share the damages? That's impossible. It was just because I found him attractive, and we dated a few times. I cut ties with him after I got pregnant.
You thought he wouldn't find out?
I thought he would forgive me even.
It was clear Brittany had underestimated her husband, disrespecting him to a disturbing degree. Her self-centeredness was shocking, even to someone she claimed to love.
But he didn't forgive me at all. He even said he's been hating how I act like a princess and that being pressured by his parents to have kids since the beginning of our marriage was torture. Isn't that terrible?
Her ability to blame others was almost enviable.
I can't pay the damages, and Mom and Dad say they have no money, so Ashley, you pay.
She doesn't have any bad intentions and thinks she'll get paid. That day, she threw away all my stuff from her parents' house, saying it was unnecessary. I was shocked to see her thinking that someone would definitely help her. I silently get up from my seat without hiding my disgust, and Brittany immediately turns pale and grabs my hand with both of hers.
I understand. I'll apologize. I'm sorry for throwing out your stuff without asking. I apologized, so we're good now, right? Give me the money quickly.
Her attempt at a pleading, sweet voice made my skin crawl. I shook off her hand. Ridiculous.
Why should I pay for the consequences of your affair? Just so you know, being sisters doesn't mean anything to me.
I hate you.
I despise you as a person. I wouldn't help you even if you begged.
Leaving money for the coffee we never got to drink on the table, I headed for the exit. Ignoring Brittany's exaggerated cries, which I assumed were a tactic to draw me back by attracting public attention, I informed the staff that I had left the payment on our table and hurried out of the cafe. It seemed she thought that making a scene would make me feel guilty enough to return. But no matter how loudly she cried or called my name with a tone of sorrow, I kept walking, speeding up as I saw her attempting to catch up to me. I didn't know what they would do if they caught me, so I ran towards a place with as much traffic as possible. Despite it being unwise for her to exert herself so soon after giving birth, I had no intention of stopping. After wandering around grocery stores, bookshops, and shopping malls for over an hour, I finally didn't see Brittany anywhere, and could breathe a sigh of relief before heading home. I ascended to the 25th floor in the elevator, quickly slipped inside my apartment, and locked the door. Just then, the video doorbell rang. It's rare for my video doorbell to be used since I don't order deliveries often, and the neighbors usually call ahead if they need something. In a building where sales visits are uncommon, the timing of the doorbell made my heart race. The video doorbell, which rang once and twice, gradually became less and less sensational. It makes such a loud noise that I wonder if they're hitting it repeatedly. Bracing myself, I noticed the monitor was pitch black. Thinking it was malfunctioning, I leaned in closer, only to realize the darkness was actually someone's eye, startling me into swiping it away. Accidentally, I pressed the response button, and the voice I'd heard earlier filled the space.
Just shut up and pay.
Ah, it's Brittany. Fear quickly turned into anger. I thought I had escaped, but now my home was compromised. Peering into a video doorbell so closely seemed like something out of a horror movie. As I remained silent, her tirades escalated. What started as demanding I pay her damages somehow morphed into insisting I owe her $1 million as compensation for the trouble she caused herself. Eventually, she demanded my apartment itself. Overwhelmed by the absurdity, I silently picked up the phone and called the security desk downstairs. They must have already been on it because, even as I was on the phone, I saw through the monitor Brittany being dragged away. I confirmed that it was indeed my sister that I cut ties and requested she not be allowed through, apologizing repeatedly for the inconvenience. She never pressed my apartment's video doorbell again, thanks to the security staff's prompt action. Later, I heard from someone near my parents' place that their house had been put up for sale. Brittany and Walter, neither willing to back down, continued their dispute to the brink of court proceedings. Despite Brittany's struggle, it was clear she was at fault, leading her to finally relent upon hearing that the court costs could also be included in the damages. Ultimately, Brittany agreed to pay Walter the amount he requested for damages. It appears she submitted DNA test results to the court, confirming no parental relationship with the child, thus absolving her of any child support obligations. Brittany, having no savings, left the payment of damages to her parents. However, due to falling behind on mortgage payments, the bank foreclosed on their home. With no way to cover both the wasteful spending and the damages, her parents were forced to sell the house and use the proceeds to pay off the housing loan. Consequently, the family had to move into a more affordable apartment in the neighborhood. Despite a sufficient income from my dad, the sudden drop in their standard of living caused stress and tension among them all, quickly depleting her dad's salary within days after deposit due to their inability to adjust from the lifestyle I once funded. My mom continues her part-time job, and she managed to find new employment. Even with childcare support, balancing work, childcare, and household duties soon after giving birth has left her overwhelmed. The silver lining is that Brittany's child is growing up well. Concerned they might not have enough resources for child-rearing, I arranged for someone in the neighborhood to pass on some flyers about childcare support to them, despite wondering if it was overstepping. On a personal note, my consistent performance since joining the company as a new graduate has been recognized, leading to a promotion. Now leading a group on a new project, my work feels rewarding. Additionally, my side businesses are thriving, with income increasing gradually. The content of the series of articles he wrote as a web writer, one of his side jobs, was highly praised and was sold as a book. The knowledge I was studying, which is often difficult to find on the internet, became popular and even became a bestseller. This success has positively impacted my other side jobs, creating a virtuous cycle. Embracing new challenges, feeling just the right amount of tiredness, and returning to my comfortable home make my days truly fulfilling.